You won't believe what happened when Karen, a self-proclaimed guardian of the peace in her quiet suburb, decided to call the police on her new black neighbor. This is a story of dismantling stereotypes and valuable life lessons that begins with a single phone call that turned the lives of several people upside down. In a small American town where neighbors knew each other, events began to unfold unexpectedly. Brenda, better known as Karen among local residents, always considered herself a protector of order and justice. She kept a watchful eye and monitored every move of her neighbors, especially the new one, David, a black man who had just moved in from the big city. David was a kind, peaceful man dedicated to his job with the FBI, an occupation that required discretion, not just because of the nature of his work, but also to protect his family from potential backlash. He was keen on establishing friendly relations with his neighbors, intending to share his warm, welcoming spirit, despite the challenges he anticipated as a newcomer. As David settled into his new home, he made an effort to introduce himself to the neighbors. He organized a small barbecue on a sunny Saturday, inviting everyone on the street. Most neighbors were receptive and chatted amicably, enjoying the food together. However, Karen remained aloof. In her eyes, this was just another ploy to encroach upon her territory. She observed David from a distance, making mental notes of everything he did that seemed threatening, which to him was nothing more than living his life. David's efforts to be a good neighbor included maintaining his yard, picking up trash in the community park, and even volunteering for local events. He attended town hall meetings and made an effort to engage with everyone he met. However, Karen's perception of him was warped. She began to share her concerns with other neighbors, questioning David's motives and whether he was truly fit to live in their community. One warm afternoon, David was working in his yard pruning some bushes and trimming the grass while on the phone, discussing a case with a colleague. The conversation involved sensitive matters pertaining to national security, nothing illegal or suspicious, just standard protocol for someone in his position. Nonetheless, Karen was watching from her living room window. She saw David gesturing animatedly on the phone and began to fabricate a narrative in her mind, convinced that there was something criminal afoot. Fueled by her own biases, Karen decided that enough was enough. She picked up her phone and dialed the police, claiming she saw an intrusion occurring next door, even though there was not a shred of evidence to support her unfounded allegations. She painted a vivid picture of a supposed threat, fully aware of how her words could impact the life of an innocent man. When the officers arrived, David was taken aback. He had just been enjoying a sunny day while doing routine yard work, and now law enforcement was knocking at his door. He greeted the officers with a cordial smile, completely unaware that the call to the police was about him. Politeness was ingrained in David's character, so when he was approached by the officers, he responded with dignity, ready to explain the situation. "Is everything all right, officers?" he asked, his brow furrowed in concern. The police, noticing his calm demeanor, asked about the report of an alleged break-in. As they questioned him, David calmly explained that he had been on the phone for work and was tending to his garden. They observed his FBI badge clipped to his belt and soon understood the gravity of the situation. "Sir, can we see your identification?" one officer inquired, his tone shifting as he grasped the reality of the misunderstanding. David reached into his pocket and produced his FBI identification. The officers exchanged glances, stunned by the realization of who they were dealing with. They quickly shifted the conversation, treating David with the utmost respect, completely contrasting Karen's portrayal of him. Meanwhile, Karen was watching from her window, feeling a rising panic as she saw the officers engaging with David. The narrative she had spun in her mind began to unravel before her very eyes. Her heart raced as she considered the gravity of the situation she had instigated. Here she was, a suburban mom who believed she was being a vigilant neighbor, but instead, she had brought the law down on an innocent man who was nothing but a neighbor. As the officers interviewed David further, they could see that he was nothing but a dedicated professional with an impeccable record. The thought of how Karen had so readily judged him based on the color of his skin made their skin crawl. After concluding their investigation, the officers turned to leave, assuring David he had nothing to worry about. But the embarrassment for Karen was only beginning. The officers decided to have a conversation with her, approaching her house, a sense of dread washing over her. How could she justify her actions? How could she defend something so indefensible? "Ma'am, can we have a word with you?" an officer politely asked as they approached her front porch. The moment Karen saw the police officers standing at her door, her composure shattered. How would she explain this to them? How would she defend her fears and allegations against the man who turned out to be a law enforcement officer himself? I just thought there was something wrong," she stammered, realizing how weak her excuse sounded. "Ma'am, the man you called about is an FBI agent," the officer explained. "He was simply doing his job." Karen froze, her face pale as realization hit her like a cold wave. The officer continued, "Your call had serious implications. You could have harmed an innocent person based solely on your assumptions." As the officers walked away, the weight of shame settled heavily on Karen's shoulders. Her insistent paranoia and bias had led her to make an unjust accusation against a man who was not only a neighbor, but someone who served the country. Now, facing the law she had once called upon, she felt the truth of her wrongdoing. The incident quickly spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. David, despite experiencing this distressing event, received an overwhelming wave of support from other neighbors who hadn't been influenced by Karen's false narrative. They began reaching out to him, wanting to show their solidarity. Many came forward to say that they did not believe Karen's claims and recognized the inherent racism in the situation. As discussion about the event made rounds at local coffee shops and schools, some neighbors expressed their disbelief that someone could act in such a prejudiced way. David became a hub for these discussions, inviting neighbors over to continue the dialogue. They shared stories from their own experiences, highlighting the importance of empathy and community. David emphasized the need to break stereotypes and explained how damaging such misconceptions could be, especially when they lead to wrongful accusations that could ruin lives. Karen, on the other hand, found herself increasingly isolated. The shame of her actions weighed heavily on her conscience, and she struggled to confront the realization of what she had done. It wasn't until she attended a community meeting that the impact of her actions truly hit her. The room was filled with people sharing personal experiences of racism and prejudice. Karen finally saw the larger societal implications of her wrongdoing. Each story shared resonated with her, amplifying her regret. People spoke about encounters with law enforcement and how they felt they had been judged based on their appearance. Karen recognized that her actions were symptomatic of larger systemic issues she had previously ignored. Feeling the weight of her conscience, she realized that her fear had resulted in pain for another. Feeling the need to address her behavior, Karen decided to speak up. "I want to apologize," she began, her voice quivering. "What I did was wrong. I let my fears and biases cloud my judgment." Gasps filled the room as neighbors looked on, some surprised to see Karen step forward. But as she continued, many listened intently. "I thought I was protecting my neighborhood, but in reality, I was perpetuating hate. I'm sorry for calling the police on an innocent man. I realize now how harmful my actions were." David, who was present at the meeting, felt a mixture of emotions. Part of him was angry, but he also recognized the courage it took for Karen to stand before everyone and admit her mistake. "I appreciate your apology, Karen," he said, trying to maintain a sense of calm. "But this is also a wake-up call for many of us. We need to do better. We need to be better." The meeting ended with many committed to fostering a more inclusive community. Several initiatives were proposed, such as neighborhood watch programs aimed at bridging gaps between residents and community forums to address issues of bias and discrimination openly. David became an invaluable resource for the community, sharing insights from his professional background on how to work together towards understanding. As the months passed, Karen began to change. She took part in these initiatives, volunteering to be a part of discussions that focused on cultural understanding and acceptance. David, too, embraced the opportunity to educate his neighbors about the struggles many face when their identities are misunderstood. Karen sought to learn more by attending seminars and workshops on diversity, equity, and inclusion. She actively engaged in conversations that challenged her perceptions and forced her to confront her biases. In one such workshop, she met individuals from various walks of life, each sharing their experiences of discrimination and injustice. Their stories were eye-opening, revealing the deep scars that prejudice leaves behind. Eventually, Karen began to mentor young people in the community, guiding them toward empathy and understanding. She organized events aimed at promoting dialogues among youth of differing backgrounds. With every interaction, Karen learned more about the invaluable lessons of compassion that exist when one learns to listen and understand. David often invited Karen to neighborhood gatherings, encouraging her to connect with others beyond her immediate circle. They worked together on community outreach programs that aimed to educate children about diversity and inclusion, fostering compassion from a young age. The partnership blossomed, showcasing the power of reconciliation and understanding. Over time, the neighborhood underwent a notable shift. It became a place where that dreaded term Karen no longer held its negative connotation. Instead, it emerged as a reminder of a pivotal moment in the community's history. People started to view it as a tale of growth, understanding, and redemption. The story of how one phone call sparked a profound change in the suburban landscape served as an ongoing lesson. It resonated within the walls of every home, emphasizing the importance of looking beyond the surface and confronting biases head-on. Neighbors learned to embrace differences, turning their once judgmental attitudes into opportunities for neighborly love and connection. No longer was David viewed through the lens of prejudice. He had become a valued member of the community, respected for who he was and what he represented. Karen often collaborated with him on initiatives designed to encourage unity and understanding. Together, they spearheaded various events, their most successful being a multicultural festival that celebrated the diversity of the neighborhood. This festival featured food, music, and art from different cultures, allowing residents to share their heritage. It became an annual tradition, fostering a sense of belonging among everyone in the neighborhood. David and Karen became co-chairs, driving the efforts toward inclusivity and facilitating discussions that connected people across different backgrounds. As the festival grew in popularity, it attracted attendees from neighboring towns and cities. David, once a victim of bias, now stood proudly, leading discussions on diversity and sharing his experiences to illustrate the importance of love over hate. Karen, who had once fueled division, now stood at his side, a testament to the transformative power of change. In the end, Karen learned the most valuable lesson of all, the power of humility. She realized that rather than being a watcher from the sidelines, she could be an active participant in fostering community, understanding that the true strength of a neighborhood lies in its diversity and compassion for one another. Through community interactions and a commitment to change, David and Karen demonstrated the possibilities that arise when individuals learn from their mistakes. What began as an uncomfortable encounter turned into a renewed commitment to drive positive change, proving that even the most difficult experiences can lead to profound lessons and connections. Thus, the story serves as a poignant reminder that the fight against racism and prejudice starts with each individual acknowledging their biases, embracing understanding, and promoting love and awareness within their communities. In a world still grappling with these issues, may this narrative inspire others to reflect on their behavior and contribute to a future that's compassionate, inclusive, and ultimately just. David's experiences became a catalyst for other neighborhoods to engage in their discussions about race and bias. Inspired, community leaders in nearby towns began reaching out to him, asking for guidance to host their own forums and workshops. David found his life taking on new meaning outside of his FBI duties as he embraced this newfound role as a community leader and educator. Karen, too, received invitations from other communities, seeking her experiences and insights into the transformation she had undergone. She became a motivational speaker, traveling to different cities to talk about her journey from prejudice to allyship. Her story resonated with many, shedding light on the complexities of human behavior and the possibility for change. Through her engagements, she emphasized the importance of self-reflection and the need to question one's assumptions. "We all have biases," Karen would say. "It's our responsibility to confront them and strive to become better individuals." Her mission quickly gained traction, inviting conversations that were both uncomfortable and necessary. David and Karen eventually authored a book together, chronicling their experiences and the lessons they had learned along the way. They titled it, Bridging the Divide, From Prejudice to Partnership, a fitting reminder that it is not too late to seek understanding and growth. The book was distributed to schools and community centers, encouraging young people to learn about empathy and inclusivity. As time went by, the neighborhood began to reflect the fruits of their labor. The once isolated community evolved into a vibrant tapestry of diverse cultures and ideas. The relationships forged during challenging times served as a model for others to adapt and mimic in their own communities. Together, David and Karen forged a legacy not only for themselves, but for everyone willing to grow and change. Their story remains a powerful testament to the human capacity for understanding and the unifying strength that love can evoke, even in the most unexpected circumstances. In the years that followed, whenever someone mentioned the name Karen, neighbors smiled, remembering her transformation and commitment to education and change. Her journey from fear to friendship became the very narrative that inspired many others to question their assumptions and strive for a greater understanding of one another. And so, their story lived on a reminder that healing and growth are possible through genuine effort, compassion, and a steadfast willingness to learn from one another in the pursuit of a better world for everyone.